Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Camera Talk News. Today, we're going to be going over the real life applications of the exposure triangle. I hope everybody enjoyed our last episode of how to choose your camera, and the episode before that, iPhone, Android, or Pro DSLR. All right, so this is just the next part of the week-long coverage that we've been doing on cameras. We've been going over a lot of things like what's the difference between a cell phone camera and a professional camera, what is the best models, what are the reviews, what is the exposure triangle. So now we're going to go a little bit more further in the exposure triangle and talk about its real life applications. I think it's very important that once you're introduced to concept that we talk about how you can use it immediately and get the most out of it. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So sit back, relax, and let's get onto this. Let's review the exposure triangle first, get that out of the way. The aperture controls the amount of light that enters the lens. Shutter speed, on the other hand, controls the time that the light has to enter the lens. And the ISO controls how sensitive the sensor is to light. That's the exposure triangle in a nutshell. Now, we said we're going to talk about real life applications. We are. Whether you are an event photographer, sports photographer, wildlife photographer, landscape, real estate, commercial photographer, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the basic knowledge of the exposure triangle, and that will elevate your photography to a new level. Let me explain why. All right, I mentioned sports photographer. You're a sports photographer. You want to use the fastest shutter speeds. Why? Because you want to capture the action. You want to capture it crisp and sharp. And if you use the fast shutter speed, you know what happens? You're going to get dark exposures. How do you counter that? There's two ways. You either widen your aperture or you raise your ISO. There's a problem there. Two problems, actually. The first problem would be that your lens has limitations. Once you open your lens as wide as it can go, that's it. You can't do anything else. The next thing you have to do is increase your ISO. What happens when you increase your ISO? You introduce noise to your image. You get some form of image degradation. Let me give you another example. All right, so you're an event photographer. You're going to wind up shooting in low light settings. You're either going to be in a venue, lights turn off, it's dance floor going on, but you want to have nice, clear images. They're properly exposed. What do? Well, first, you're going to open your aperture as wide as possible, but you also have to think about how much depth of field you have to have in order for your images to appear sharp. So you have a certain limitation there. Next thing you're going to do to counter limitation is to decrease your shutter speed to a slower shutter speed so you can let more light in. If you are able to receive the results that you want, great. If not, then the other thing you're gonna have to do is introduce your ISO by raising it up again. That's a second real life scenario. Let's talk about another one. You are a landscape photographer and you want everything to be nice and sharp. So instead of opening your aperture as wide as possible, you're going to close it down as much as possible and have everything sharp in your image. And again, you're gonna have to increase your shutter speed to a point that things don't become blurry if they're moving. And then the next thing is that you might have to increase your ISO. I know that a lot of photographers will tell you, or a lot of professional photographers say, you have to keep it manual. And I say, no, you gotta get the best picture and you gotta use everything that can assist you. All right, so there's this thing called metering modes. It's built into your camera. And what it is a light meter that reads light. And it tells you whether the light that's reaching the lens or reaching the sensor through the lens, if it's properly exposed or not. And the way it does so, it averages everything out to 15% gray. Why 15% gray? Well, some camera engineers thought that would be the best way to describe whether an image is properly exposed or not. So the metering mode will take either a spot on your frame, something a little bit more larger, or the entire frame itself, and will say, you know what, this falls at this level. It's either going to be overexposed or underexposed or properly exposed. The way it does this, it has a little line graph with 0 right in the middle. You have +1, +2, +3, or you have -1, -2, -3. And so your image that the camera captures based on the metering mode is way too bright. You might want to say, you know what, you are way too bright, let me lower you down. So you're going to shoot something like -1 or -2. At that point, you're saying, whatever you are reading on your camera, darken this down a little bit, and that will be the proper exposure. So it's almost like a manual mode. You still have control, but you're letting your camera decide the technical aspect of it. Things could have been easier. Let me show you how you're going to use that in a real life scenario. All right, so you know what metering modes are now, and so let's talk about the assist modes. You have two of them. First one's going to be aperture priority, and the second one is going to be shutter priority. How does the aperture priority work? Well, you tell your camera, hey, I want this aperture. Do not change it. And your camera will keep the aperture locked, and it will change the shutter speed or the ISO, but the aperture will not change. Or you can say, you know what, camera, I want this shutter speed. I don't want it to go slower or faster. This is the shutter speed for me. And then your camera will do the other work. It will decide the aperture or the shutter speed. Again, you're not doing the work, camera is. That's why it's called photo assist mode. You let the camera assist you. It helps you worry less about the technical things so you can concentrate on the more important things like composition, posing, lighting, and taking your images to the next level. Now, that's all that we have for today. You need to check back tomorrow as we review the camera, the Sony a7S III. Is it a great camera, game changer, or is it time to change brands? Tune in for the right answer tomorrow right here at Camera Talk News. See you.